Gauthier. Jay is the CMO of Personal Insurance at Travelers. Jay's responsibility is to build immersive and empowering consumer online experiences, which generates direct business and also drives agent business as well. So welcome, Jay. Thank you. Next to Jay, we have Bob Klein. Bob is the Chief Strategy Officer at Blue Chip Marketing Worldwide. Bob brings over 30 years of experience as a global head. He used to work at DDB and JWT, sorry. Actually, Blue Chip is one of the fastest growing agencies in Chicago. So one anecdotal professional fact is that Bob worked on switching the Budweiser Light brand to the Bud Light brand, which took over Miller Lite. So thank you for that, Bob. That was good. And then next to Bob, we have Daniella Koren, who is the CEO of DKI. Daniella is the founded DKI in 1997. She has grown her company to be the leader in the healthcare space around the relationship marketing arena. She's been busy through that time because in that time she's also co-founded another company called Convergent Point Media in 2007. One interesting anecdote from a personal perspective about, for Daniella is that she is a 2 times world champion in American smooth ballroom dancing. So we're lucky we're not dancing on stage today, but that's an interesting fact. And then next to Daniella, we have John Lee, who is the Senior Vice President of Client Advisory Group for Merkle. He leads both the financial services, the insurance, and the healthcare verticals across all of Merkle's core services, including CRM, data, and digital. And then last but not least, we have Gabe Weiss, who is the strategy lead for SapientNitro. Gabe oversees the digital strategy team at SapientNitro. Gabe calls Sapient the new breed of digital strategy. Which is interesting because they have done some interesting stuff. Agency. What did I say? Strategy. Agency. Strategy. Okay. Welcome, panelists. So let's get started. All right. So the first question, might as well start with Gabe to the panel is, so Gabe, as an industry, have we moved forward in terms of using data for the purposes of informing creative in the right way? And what has your experience has been at Sapient? How do you guys do it?
I think as an industry, we are making strides. We're trying a lot of things. I don't think we've found any standardized way to do anything yet, frankly. I think, if anything, we're living in an industry that's in constant change, and we are trying everything we can to figure out what are the right ways to do things. And as our channels keep fragmenting and the opportunities keep changing, we still want to be able to reach the right customer at the right time in the right place with all of our creative. And the data that we get has to inform or derive the insights that can help us identify those customers, reach them with the right message at the right time in the right place.
Excellent. Daniella, what is your point of view?
I think everyone else needs to give a fun fact. But yeah, so seriously, my perspective comes from the healthcare industry, and in our industry, we're sort of forced to make sure that it's data-driven. It is a data-driven industry. And the customers that we're targeting are typically, for us, patients and caregivers who are suffering from chronic diseases. So we have to leverage data that we know about them. We can't talk to somebody who's just been diagnosed with breast cancer the same way as we can talk to someone with metastatic breast cancer. So unless we're relevant and we tailor the content, the consumers won't trust or find the resources credible. So we've really had to do that for quite a while, and we're trying to evolve that. As you said, I don't think we're totally there, but I think we've had to over the years.
So, John, we had a discussion a while back, and the question is, does the big idea in its traditional sense, kind of top-down, where you have a few creatives in a room coming up with these big ideas, and then it translates itself to all sorts of channels, is that still relevant? Does that still hold kind of the power it had in the past?
Yeah, I think my point of view is the big idea still exists. So I'm not trying to say that it doesn't, but I think it exists really as a sort of platform, right? I think it generates interest, sort of top of the funnel, But the emphasis on the agency, that's sort of what we're really here to talk about, to me, and the skill sets and the value really is in how do you connect, all the data, right, all the knowledge about the consumer, and really deliver on that big idea in a way that is an experience for the individual customer that we can actually measure the value on, right? And I think that the reality is I don't know how long ago, 10, 20 years ago, this sort of Mad Men sort of context that we had, that was that was the big lever that we all had to pull, right? And the reality is that skill set, to be sort of bold here, I think has been massively minimized by the sort of value that we can add with the decisions we can make out of the data.
I really think that the big idea today isn't just viable. I think it's more crucial than ever before. The reliance simply on tactics to be able to go after all these different segments that exist is just going to get lost in the sea of sameness out there. I don't know how many people, I'm pretty certain a number of people were maybe checking their email during the course of the morning and early afternoon. I think I counted better than 100 emails that came through. And I just wrote a couple of them down that I thought were particularly entertaining. And these were beyond the 80 that came from the company. I was precisely targeted with emails from Curves for Women, Procter & Gamble special offers for household cleaning products. I got a pedicure and manicure offer. I got an email entitled The Holy Grail on Skinny. And let's see, Social Security advice on how to extend my benefits. I still got a few years to go, I hope. And mortgage rates, and I did pay off my mortgage, thank God, 5 years ago. And I think the backdrop of what I'm referring to is there's all this big data, yet there's a tremendous volume of irrelevancy out there. And what I worry about in terms of big idea and messaging targeting, I worry that this industry is headed towards what Jay and I were talking before. He serves on the board of the Direct Marketing Association. Those who remember, direct marketing was always referred to as junk mail, right? Where's this industry headed? Because if I'm sitting there getting served ads via email for Curves for Women, there's something fundamentally not right out there, and it's destroying, in my estimation, the landscape of leveraging big data. And I think that's just the reality of what's happening. And that worries me a lot.
So Jay is an advertiser, which, by the way, is great because typically we don't have advertisers that sit on the panel. So kudos to you to come join us. When you guys go through your creative process, how do you infuse data into that decision-making process, and does it help? Does it help? Do you see results?
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. First of all, from a the big idea point of view, I mean, we really see that as being a very important part of the overall marketing strategy. I think John talked about it as a platform. We see that as the opportunity to use the right media to create perceptual scale in terms of what we're trying to do. And again, I work for Travelers. We're selling auto and home insurance to consumers across the country, right? So it's a pretty crowded marketplace. If you look at the amount of money being spent in that space, we spend a lot of time talking about our competitive landscape and how to be more, really targeted and responsible, and how we're going to generate demand in this marketplace. And data becomes very, very important. So beyond the goals that we have for brand and creating that sort of positive sentiment among consumers, then data then takes a role really center stage in terms of everything else that we do from a precision marketing point of view. And again, I know you don't want to have the offline discussion, but it has a role there, as well as what we're doing in terms of our digital media, be it paid or earned. I'm really glad you didn't mention Travelers in that list of things that you got were irrelevant. I was waiting for that. But we make sure that our use of data in that space is really created to to drive three primary focused areas of targeting. One being geographic. We can do that a lot at Travelers, and because we're in the risk management business, there are a lot of things that we can pivot on, weather being one of those. So, when it's cold outside, we can use that information at a local level to be able to talk about risk mitigation strategies for homeowners, and how to get information on how to, clear ice dams, as an example. That being the first dimension, the second being a contextual one, and we're having a lot of fun in that area. And I owe a lot of thanks to the partners and the agencies that we work with, two of which are sitting up here with me, that have enabled us to put the sort of consumer intent, consumer interest smack in the middle of that inventory. So that becomes a critical piece for us, and we think a very important strategy in around our digital marketing. And then the third is the behavioral aspect, which obviously you all would clearly see the relevance of that, and we want to be prudent with that behavior, and not sort of I think someone said earlier, ambush the consumer. We're finding that it can be very helpful, and particularly in terms of what we're doing with retargeting, and not to get into the results, but they do speak for themselves, and you find that by creating a heightened level of relevance between what you are trying to do as an advertiser and the consumers you're trying to reach, that you're going to get the behavior you want from that.
So, Bob, in terms of the hyper-targeting email that you brought up, is that just an example of, let's say, maybe bad use of data, would you say? In terms of like they're just not able to find the right candidate for their offer. But if it worked the way it's supposed to, all of those emails would have been relevant. And what Jay said is that they're trying to create they're trying to create an experience which is relevant both at the direct response level, but also provide that halo effect that provides a constant reinforcement. So how do we work through this, through this kind of direct use of data still from a standpoint of making it relevant, email being an example?
Well, I certainly don't have the answer. I'm the least qualified person in the room to answer the question about why I'm getting pedicure and manicure emails on a Wednesday morning. But if you go back to what Gabe said right at the start, and he talked about a term that we use, aperture, but you were talking about receptivity, points when whoever the target is that you happen to be talking to is most receptive to the message. And that's really, to me, the boil down of what needs to happen from the big idea. And it truly begins at the strategic stage and looking at the different target audience constituents that you're trying to reach and identifying those points in time where they're most receptive to the message and can take action on it. And it's not about a disparate number of messages. It's about that same singular message, be it you're better off under the umbrella, and the whole idea of optimum or ultimate protection, perhaps, if I'm perhaps paraphrasing it right from Travelers, but it then gets into the relevancy of environment. And I love the example of the cold weather, one that we use for Vicks thermometry. They came up with a new thermometer that measures baby's temperature behind the ear. What we did was targeted the messages at times where flu index was particularly high in a given area. And then we went off specifically through big data and through being able to use behavioral targeting as well as demographics to be able to reach those new and expectant moms at a point in time where their sensitivity about flu would be particularly higher. But it always came back to that grounded big idea, which was this idea of one touch, one confident mom, because you could get baby's temperature in just a 1-second read. So it's still about the big idea, but I do believe, back to what Gabe set up right from the opening comments, it really is examining what's the relevancy in terms of the aperture, that moment of receptivity where that message is really going to break through and not, frankly, get tuned out by roughly 99.7% of the people, think about this, that don't click on a banner ad. And if you told someone that your banner ad was going to get clicked on, was going to be ignored by 99.7% of the target audience, I wonder if the client would agree to spend that money. I'm playing with the statistics, but the fact is still the same. The vast majority of stuff that's out there that's cluttering the inboxes and cluttering what we're viewing online is largely irrelevant, even with all this big data. And again, I bring up the analogy to junk mail. This is really concerning. So all the big data in the world, I think it's useless if you don't find the relevancy in the communications.
You know, Bob, if I can build on that, SapientNitro, we've evolved the idea, the big idea, into this concept of connected thinking. And the way that we design connected thinking is by looking at the customer and understanding where are they in their journey, whether it be an awareness, consideration, their research phase, down into the purchase, pre-purchase funnel, purchase, and then repeat, right? And so at each of those moments, there's different need states of those customers. There's different motivations. There's different pieces of information and or experiences that they need to help them move down that funnel a little bit closer, right? So we consider that across the board in the way that we design our experiences. And I think a lot of what we talked about today has really been about acquisition and awareness. And when we think about this concept of connected thinking, we think about what is the brand story that we want to tell, right? And the way we bring that to life is this concept of storyscaping, where we look at all of those moments of connectivity and what is the brand story that you need to tell? What's that message? What's that concept that needs to get across in that moment that will move them down that funnel?
Yeah, I'll just continue to push on this a little bit in the sense that I really just to kind of keep the conversation going. I just don't really think it's true, right? I mean, we can even to me sitting here, it feels like the right thing to do to say, hey, look, it's both. The big idea still kind of really matters in equal parts. And I just don't think it's really true. Sort of, Bob's point a little bit about all the clutter, right? 99% of the people who you put display ads in front of are ignoring them, and a higher percent are not going to click through. The reality is if you're Jay, right, and you're out in the marketplace in an extremely competitive market trying to sell insurance with Geico and Progressive blasting, hundreds of millions and billions of dollars, right, into this clutter. Right, the sort of practical reality is your agency have to deal with how do I use data, analytics, attribution, precision to know, right, how I'm going to spend and cut through that clutter, what's working in what combination. And I'm being a little bit extreme for the purposes of the panel, but the reality is if my belief, and Jay's here so he can speak for himself, if Jay has 2 hours in the day to spend, right? My belief is Jay's going to spend the majority of that 2 hours talking about, what's really, how do I really make sense, right, of how to cut through, target customers, deliver relevant experiences through that clutter, right? The reason you're getting those bad emails is because someone's not using data, right? The reason I get relevant emails from Netflix, right, recommending the next movie I should watch based on the movies I just watched, right? And hitting me at just the right time on Friday evening is because they are using data, right? I think that's sort of the big idea is that data, it's sort of data first, in my view.
So these lower funnel tactics, generally kind of that we call DR, that are intended to kind of drive immediate outcomes. So Jay, in terms of in your business, what are your main KPIs? Because if your KPIs are conversions on the site, arguably you have to leverage big data. You have to get in front of the consumer multiple times, whether it's with display, video, and whatnot.
Yeah, it's great. So I'm definitely a lower funnel guy. So let's make it perfectly clear, particularly to my agency partners. It becomes really, really important, and John knows that. But we also look at it on a portfolio basis, right? So at the end of the day, we're looking at what we generate. The two KPIs, just to be really clear, it's quotes and sales. So I encourage you, go out to travelers.com, little quote engine like every other insurance page. Put in your zip code and you're off, but please, finish it because it's going to screw up my metrics tomorrow, and then I'll be really upset with everybody right here. But those are the key metrics, and as John said, look, I look at the numbers across all the media, and the one thing that I would say is that's served me really well, and this is really a credit to the agency partners that I have, is making sure that from an attribution point of view, I've got a really clear view into sort of causality. And so at the end of the day, I can count that. Now, where I think we have a lot of sort of progress to be made is in the area of fractional attribution. So I know, as an example, that I'm showing a lot of display ads to consumers, either by way of the prospecting work that we're doing and the remarketing that we're doing through our DSP. You know, on a cost per basis, it's a really advantageous for me to be in that space. So I know strategically travelers can be a very significant player digitally. When I think about the cost associated to being like a, you know, say a top 3 share voice advertiser. That's my goal, and that's where I'm going to spend my time. I'm going to look at what I'm generating from a quotes and sales point of view, but then my expectation on, you know, the work that we're doing with Merkle, the work that we're doing with Turn, or the work that we're doing with Sapient, you know, is for them to be able to help me understand from a view-based point of view, what's the actual frequency and sequencing of activity that's going to ultimately, at the end of the day, deliver the portfolio result at the bottom, right? At the bottom of that funnel. And I think, you know, right now we're having a lot of, we've got a lot of really great learning, a lot of really great experimentation that's going on in that place. And what's making me confident as an advertiser in the industry is the attribution. Right? So, you know, again, for those of you that are providing these services, I think that's the best way to do the, you know, be able to get the cashectomy that you want out of the clients that you're serving, is making sure that you can actually drive that level of accountability. You can have great conversations with your clients specific to what you're really accomplishing, and we're seeing it play out. We're seeing it play out in remarketing that a year ago, I would have stood up here in front of all you guys and said, I don't believe it. I don't think it's going to work. I don't believe in the CVCs. I just don't think it's going to work. And you know, Merkle, I think to their credit, in combination with our partners at Turn, have really done a nice job. And they're really making me a believer of the importance of that data. Now it's off to see, okay, what can we do in the areas of market expansion? What are we going to do in the areas of getting me, you know, additional consumers that I can't traditionally get out of the, you know, the areas that I'm advertising now? And I think we've got a pretty good innovative story that we're chasing.
So the proof is in the pudding. So if our metrics are these lower funnel metrics, right? But we also then maybe talk about what Gabe said is like, how do we tell a story? So it comes back to this notion of, can we use the data to tell a story even in a DR sense? You know, can we sequence messaging, and how do we do it? Templated creative, how do we do this? So maybe Daniella, because you guys are in that kind of very highly targeted space, how do you develop creative, and how do you sequence your communication?
Sure. So I think, you know, there's a place for templates, and obviously too templated is not a great idea. So having the creative team work with the analytics team is essential. They need to read all of the data. They need to be at all the presentations to understand what the metrics are and what kind of impact that has on the creative. So if we develop a program with multiple segments, there's got to be an overarching idea for the program. But each segment has to have a highly customized message. And the creative team needs to understand how to write copy that's nuanced based on not just behavioral segmentation, but also attitudinal segmentation. Because in the pharmaceutical industry, we have people who are diagnosed or not diagnosed, but then we have people who trust their doctors and everything that they say and believe that they're God. And then we have other people who want to go to 6 different doctors for opinions and research everything online and probably know more than their doctors do. So the creative and the copy is going to read a lot differently, not only on behavioral but also attitudinal metrics. So the copywriters really need to understand all of that research. They need to understand insights that are brought forward from our targets, and the designers need to understand the user experience in the digital world, and the user experience that is going to be best for the patient or caregiver. We're in an industry where people are sick. They don't have a ton of time to sit on their computer and see a lot of imagery. Our industry is not about beautiful photos. Pharma, people make fun of it. It's people running along beaches and in grassy fields and all of that. And from my perspective, it's about content. I'd rather see very little imagery and take a completely editorial approach and really get the copy right and nuanced so that the next time I send them an email or a text message or bring them back to a website, they're engaged, because my engagement metrics need to be going up and up and up. So I think, unless the creative team isn't looped in, you can have a beautiful template. We've seen gorgeous templates, but they're really not what's going to move the dial.
So what you're describing, I think, it's focused on content. Is it almost content attribution, if you will, right? So so really maybe ignoring the channel, right? Figuring out how do I sequence content in a way, irrespective of channel, that's going to drive the specific outcomes, right?
Well,
and nobody's really broken through in that space.
There's an acronym I love, and I just wrote an article about this 2 weeks ago, and it's COPE, Create Once, Publish Everywhere. So when copy's written, it's not about a specific channel. You're right. It's not about whether it's digital or offline or text or email or what have you. It's creating core content that we know is going to motivate someone to take action. That's what we're trying to do. The action could be to call my doctor. The action could be to download a coupon. The action could be to talk to my caregiver about what's going on in my life. It doesn't matter. But we need to create that content once, and for efficiency's sake, again, in pharmaceutical, we have to it's highly, highly regulated. It takes forever to get creative through the system. We have medical, regulatory, legal teams that are reviewing all of this stuff, and so we really have to get it right the first time so that when it's reviewed, we don't have to get it reviewed in every single tactical format. We can look at the core content and then publish it wherever we want, test it.
I was only going to add, when you think about creatives, how many creatives are in the audience today? Raise your hands. One, I can see, sorry. I think the thought is that creatives are not that open to anything more than one single brief unless they're very specifically direct marketing oriented or digitally oriented. And what I find is that our creatives they just seek and crave insights, right, that they can build on and find a really unique way to reach a customer. They don't need it to be a single giant one big idea. They just want the formula that you want them to answer. So when we talk about it, we look at those micro moments that we're trying to push down a funnel. So if it's a 25-year-old who just bought a car, how do I reach them and what's the right message that's going to motivate them to think about travelers at that moment, right? That a creative can sink their teeth into. But if I give them a massive spreadsheet with 45 of these, it'll just take them a little bit longer to get through. But what I want, and the types of creatives that we work with, they show up at our desk after things launch wanting to know how they're performing. They want to see the reports. They want to understand what they can do to make them better. And when things that they wrote copy, they want to know how to rewrite it so it can perform better and go back into market and optimize it. And I think those are the types of creatives that the industry is looking to cultivate and grow, given the fluence around data that's required as we move forward into this new age, so to speak.
I think a really interesting point here is the sophistication and granularity of the decisions we can make about time of day, frequency, placement, targeting has just vastly outstretched the sophistication of that level of granularity from the creative, from the experience, and frankly, how it even gets delivered, right? So in this sort of day and age, I mean, we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we get that sort of level of decisioning then into the content delivery system itself, right? And it can be data everywhere, but not a drop of content, right? You think about the personalization, types of systems that are out there that Adobe is working on, right? The reality is we're not generating as marketers, right, the richness of content, and we're not leveraging that technology, right, to extend out that sophistication out to where it really reaches the customer, right? And I think that's sort of hopefully the thing that we'll be talking about, here 2-3 years from now is that sort of bridge being crossed. But I think that's where it sort of ends right now.
Yeah, I think some of the challenges there is that there's just the cost-benefit ratio isn't there to fully deliver 50 different customized versions of everything, right? To 5 people who might not pay out. And I think the challenge is where do you find that cost-benefit ratio to invest? And it's a lot of what marketers ask us about.
Right. But in digital, I think we've all had that experience of, look, I was just on the Dell website or the whatever website. I browsed all these things, I looked at all this content, I clearly was shopping for this, and then I go to CNN.com and you remarket me with this? Like, really? That's what you got? Right? It's like, look, you know so much, right? But the reality is that your content delivery didn't match up to the knowledge, right? And so much was like, ooh, John's there, right? Let's get him with the remarketing ad, let's buy it, let's buy it and let's bid on it. But we sort of stopped short, and I think we can all see sort of massive examples of that, just sort of not really delivering on the capability.
So, one of the themes this morning was the discussion of simplification. And Gabe, you bring up you can see the creative people running for the exit when you walk in with a brief that identifies 45 different target audiences that they need to take the brief and translate and develop creative against. Now, if you happen to be a multi-million-dollar advertiser, you may have a battalion of creative people that can attack the 45 different segments. The reality of the symposium today is that a vast amount of the discussion is about really, I believe, big budget advertisers. The reality also is the majority of advertisers aren't huge budget advertisers. So what it really demands is figuring out within all of this big data that's available, who are the most relevant and profitable customers that you want to go after. And I think in every business today, at least any that I've worked across in my career, it still comes back to an 80-20 rule. So I think one of the most fundamental things we have to do with the data is find that 20% of the audience that represents 80% likely of your profits and certainly of your volume. And then very, very precisely get your team focused against those segments that are going to yield, that are going to bear the most fruit. Because the risk is that the data just paralyzes you and you end up doing nothing. And even worse, as it paralyzes you, the fear of trying things causes you to not act. And as a result, all this great data really goes to waste. But it does require storytellers and it does require strategists who have the ability to really narrow it down to the nuggets that you really can go after in terms of a creative brief, so you don't walk in with 45 different briefs and they run for the exits.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think over-segmentation is one of the key issues that we find. We're often brought in when there's something in place and there's 45 segments and the client says, could you please fix this because there's an N of 2, in terms of looking at the results, and a year later we don't really remember why we have 45 segments. So I totally agree. We always recommend starting simple with the highest value customers, and then, in my mind, the big idea, or what I get most fascinated with, is when we can carve out another couple of segments after we've looked at the data and the metrics and the engagement to see what's working. I think that's one of the biggest ideas that we can have is, wow, there's a sub-segment here that seems to be really highly engaged. Why don't we talk to them a little bit differently and optimize the program? I think the term big idea is like you said, the madmen. It's a little bit intimidating, but in direct marketing, the big idea can be very, very simple and can be part of an optimization plan.
I think to what Bob was saying before, I think one of the things to think about, we have this massive flow of data. I think somebody said 2 petabytes a day earlier as one of the stats. How do you find those nuggets, right, at the end of the day? And I think our opportunity and what we think about is that data is a recipe. It's ingredients and recipe for what you need to do. An example, I used to work with a pet manufacturer, pet products manufacturer, and they found the magic question. Does anybody know the magic question? The magic question in pets is, does your pet sleep in your bed? And if they do, you're 5 times more likely to spend, or you spend 5 times more on your pet than anyone whose pet doesn't sleep in your bed. So how do you find the magic question to market easily to your customers? That's something you get excited about, right? And people are giggling because they know their pet sleeps with them.
So the big insight here, at least from this panel that I can draw out, is that in having an integrated agency where you have both the media and the creative sit side by side is important. I mean, it's step one, right? And we've seen over the course of the past 10, 20 years, that's been kind of separated. You had kind of the brand agencies focusing on creative. You had the media agencies with all the data and analytics. And oftentimes the idea came one way, and then these guys had to figure it out. But what I'm hearing here is, even though there might be some discussion around is the big idea dead or not, the real answer is that you have to have these people sitting close side by side and exchanging that information and those insights.
Michael, I want to challenge that just a little bit, because I've seen definitely a change in that trend. And maybe it's because of big data. I think that certainly when you think about the big idea, absolutely, agency sitting alongside the media agency comes forward with a very cogent, integrated plan that you can put in market. But when I think about the specific traction that we are able to generate on the digital side, the data that is necessary in order to be able to glean the actionable insights, so to go forward and project that on a larger prospect universe, is not necessarily available inside the media agency. The company, Travelers, I can tell you right now, is not going to push that data outside for obvious reasons. There are intellectual capital issues, IP-related issues that are going to force us to hold on to that. And as a result, we've made the investments to build, the data scientist, proficiency inside the organization, right? So a couple years ago, you might look at an insurance company and say, well, your fundamental skills, your underwriting capability, your claim servicing capability. But now the company sees a need to basically create a deeper level of proficiency in marketing, data analytics, the data sciences, specifically for the purposes of not only mining big data, but managing big data, right? So, there are many of us who, again, a year ago, wouldn't be knowledgeable or even conversant in the technologies necessary in order to be able to do that. Today, you can take people inside of an insurance company and start having a conversation about that technology. And so the question, you sort of throw to the panel and even throw out to the audience is, does it begin to sort of minimize the tangible impact that the media agencies are going to be able to have with the advent of big data, right? If you don't have access, if you don't have hooks into the transactional data, if you don't have hooks into those kernels of information that are going to drive sort of the insight that you need to be able to make better media decisions, better targeting decisions, better advertising decisions, how are you going to get that done?
That's an interesting model, and it is progressive because, no pun, but it's...
I agree.
Yeah. And in the sense where now the advertiser might have an opportunity to provide a lot of insight to both the media agency and the creative agency and direction in terms of execution, right? And it is rare. So if you guys are doing that, kudos, because at that point you know a lot more, and then you know what to expect from your partners. Right.
I really like what Jay's talking about and the future of some of the opportunities that marketers are considering and building inside. And when you think about what this room is going to be talking about in 5 years even, I get excited about the centralized decisioning engines as an example that a lot of clients are starting to try and even just figure out how do they build central decision-making systems that are automated. It's no longer the humans. Where they're building their own brand algorithm that grows and evolves and learns over time. What happens when that thing gets out of control? Another topic. But you think about this decisioning engine that's centralized in the organization, but still feeds out to every touch point that a customer can be reached at, so that you're in an omni-channel fashion, reaching them with the right message at the right time, with the right decision for that mode that you've recognized them in, ideally. That's a really interesting place for us to be reaching and talking about how do we manage that thing from a governance perspective. It almost becomes a content management thing just for the rules, right? And then what do you do with that, and how do you build the creative for all of those different moments? Think about that sort of world that we're driving towards right now, and the levels of investment that it's going to take right now are only really reachable by the people who are in the 100 or in the $1 billion marketing range. But that's going to come down. There's many providers in this room building DMPs right now, or have DMPs. There's no one DMP I would say is the best DMP today, but there's going to be a point where that's maybe a place where the media providers own the value, is that handoff from the DMP to the own media system.
Michael, I just want one last plea for the vitality of the big idea. And my argument is this, and we'll go back to the panelists early this morning, Macy's in particular. I contend that you can win the transaction battle with those 5 touches that a consumer makes with a department store in the course of a year. But if you do that at the expense of building the brand, you'll become Sears Roebuck in the future. You will win on the basis of the deal, of the transaction of the day, of the 15% off coupon that I get every single week from Macy's because I'm a loyal card holder, and you will fail to do what companies like Travelers does by committing to, in fact, a very big idea, a huge idea, which is tantamount in the insurance industry, whether it's owning Mayhem or Good Hands or Good Neighbor. If it doesn't still root in a big idea, brands will die in the future. And those who say it's impossible look at the most valuable brand in the world, and that's Apple. And it executes against countless target audiences with sophisticated direct marketing tools. But they stand for something. They stand for one thing very clearly. And Steve Jobs still is here reminding people that it is, at the end of the day, all about the brand. And I make a plea to everybody to never let that go away, or really our job as strategic communicators will become strategic executors or tactical executors.
That's good.
Mike, we're going to break for coffee, and you can, unless somebody has a quick question before we break. Yep. Go ahead.
Hi, great panel. Tony Jarvis, Olympic Media Consultancy. I'm worried about the dog, Jay. I love great creative. In terms of what you were saying about creating an internal data scientific structure, having worked on the agency side, we always pleaded with our partner clients to be a true partner and share the data. I'm worried about what you said, because what I could easily jump to is, oh, Travelers gone out of the market because they're going in-house completely. So can you just share a little more? It's a dangerous road, it's a dangerous, what is it, dangerous field to plow.
I didn't throw that out there to be provocative, but other than to, sort of express sort of a direction I see our company going based on the importance of big data and how we sort of glean insight and take action against it. I'm most curious, first of all, you worried about the dog?
I love your dog.
Okay, he's 11. We just shot 2 commercials last week in LA, so they're coming. Yeah, he's fabulous. But I think, back to a point made earlier, and I'll come back to your other question. The art of storytelling is the essence of what we're really trying to do with that, right? We're trying to stay super true to the brand. We're sort of pushing away every other company's strategy in insurance when it comes to advertising, right? And staying very true to helping the consumer protect what's important to them. And what we see, where our agencies are really adding the most value, is in helping us stay true to that story and to be masters at storytelling, right? And then again, from a digital realm, being able to connect the right content, the content discussion earlier, super important, so that the consumer can actually engage with the brand and actually get a sense for that. But back to data, the data issue. Again, might be just true to Travelers in that, look, we're a company that takes a lot of ownership in and around the IP that's being generated around our business, right? We sell a very specialized product, and we're really nervous, frankly, about that information sort of being, propagated with other companies that are in our space that want a similar type of consumer. So, when we talk about the partnership, particularly the partnership of the data scientists inside the company and the agencies, we do think there's a way to do that. However, it may be a scenario where, we're never going to buy into a pure external DMP strategy. It's just not going to happen, because then, frankly, I become a hostage to that environment, and I don't want to be a hostage to the environment. Now, you may not look at it that way, but Travelers does, right? And so what we think, what we're in a position to do, provide that information back to our agency partners, specifically the ones that are helping us make the millisecond decisions on what ad inventory to serve and how much to pay for it or how much to bid on it, and then ultimately to make better decisions as we go beyond prospecting into remarketing. We're going to provide you the data, but we're going to provide it to you in a way you can use it, not really understand what you have, okay? That would be sort of the way we're going to partner.
Mike, panel, thank you very much. We're going to take about a 10-minute break for coffee.